Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Aires. Welcome back. If you are tuning in now, we are starting the second block of a series of presentations as we continue the conference, What Can Spiritism Do for You? Which is more than a statement, it is a question that we hope you have answered to the end of this day. Hosting us this today is Plenitude Spiritist Society of Orlando. We also have 5 different speakers from different Spiritist organizations united this morning and this afternoon, promoting the unification and fraternity. 3 have already participated in amazing topics. Now we are pleased to present our next 2 speakers. We'd like to remember everyone that we're going to have a Q&A in the end of the presentation. So feel free to send us your questions in the chat area, okay? So our first speaker is, for this block, is Vitor Eugenio. Vitor is from the Andreia Luiz Spiritist Center in Tampa, and his topic is Choose Love Over Suffering. Choose wisely. Welcome, Vitor.
Hey, Teresa. Hey, guys. Good to be here.
Good to have you.
All right. Oh, thank you. So, guys, guess you guys can see my slide now. So, good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with you guys today, share this afternoon. And let's just start by thanking, Jesus and his good spirits for the opportunity to be here today, that we're going to talk about how to suffer less and love more. So I really hope that, I can give you guys a little bit of more hope, so that we can go through our daily tribulations. And that, God give us, the courage and the strength to go over our inner battles and, and what our day-to-day struggles. So today we're going to talk about choosing love over suffering and how to choose wisely. Most of the things that we're going to discuss here today were taken from the chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And the name of that chapter is Blessed Are the Afflicted. So without further ado, let's go ahead. So I would like to start just by giving you guys some definitions that that's going to help us to set the stage to kind of understand what suffering is, and then, a few questions that, most people have about it. So today I brought 3 definitions of suffering to share with you guys. And, the first one is, from any dictionary, and it says, suffering is characterized by the sensation of pain, malaise, and unhappiness in a person. So essentially, suffering is something that doesn't feel good, right? Sometimes you can feel sick, but you're not sick at the point that you were suffering, or you're struggling with some emotions or something that's happening, and that brings you suffering. So essentially, by that definition, suffering, it is something that doesn't make us feel good. The second definition that I have is how psychology sees suffering, and it goes this way. In psychology, they clearly differentiate between real and imaginary suffering. Both dimensions have a negative emotional charge that directly interferes with our quality of life or emotional balance. So just a little bit from what I just told you guys about the general definition of suffering is. In psychology, they mention real and imaginary suffering. And some of you guys are thinking, can we imagine, can we create suffering? Yes. So if you think about it, sometimes we ourselves have difficulty to see if we are suffering for something that it's real, or if it's by something that we create ourselves. So I thought it was really interesting that there is a difference between the two, and I myself was not aware. So that was, a learning topic for me. And the third one is the religious definition of suffering, and essentially it's the opportunities for readjustments that God give us. So if you guys just go back to the other two that I just spoke about, and you just read the third one, this is the one that gives us some sort of a hope, because it kind of demystifies the whole suffering of being a bad thing and change for the word opportunity, right? So that kind of gives us a glimpse on how can we make suffering better, so then we can learn something positive about it. So now that we define what is suffering, there's come the first question, right? So why do we suffer? And then I have a little excerpt from Blessed Are the Afflicted, chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And it goes this way. And it is in the section Current Causes of Affliction, number 4. The afflictions of life are two kinds, or if you like, they have two different sources that is important to distinguish. Some have their cause in the present life, others outside this life. So, according to the Spiritist doctrine, what is taught to us is that suffering can come from two ways. You either suffering from something that happens in this life, and most times we suffer because of things that we cause to ourselves. And sometimes we suffer because those are things from our past. So in some cases where there are reparations to be made, that suffering happens in your present life, so you can kind of pay that debt from a previous life. So that help us to put into perspective situations in our lives where we try to understand where the suffering comes from, and sometimes we can't explain. You have cases where you have things that happen with children in a very early age, and sometimes we think to ourselves, why does that child has to suffer in such a young age? Maybe because it's something from a past life, but in other situations where we have a situation with family or with work or with a friend that is not going very well in our relationships, and then we suffer, that help us to put into perspective, did I do something that made me come to this point that I'm suffering, or did someone did something to me, or does that come from a past life? So that kind of help us to put that into perspective and kind of start to rationalize why you're suffering. Because once we figure out why we suffer, that's one step towards trying to fix it or trying to suffer less. So it is important for us to understand why we suffer. So that's the definition here. So now, moving forward, another question. Is suffering necessary? And the short answer is yes. So suffering is necessary. But why is suffering necessary? Because we just spoke in the previous slide that you can either suffer to repay debts, or you can either suffer because of situations were caused in this life. And thinking about the religious definition of suffering, which is an opportunity for reparation, and taking into context the world that we live in, right, which is a world of trials and expiations, yes, suffering is necessary because those are the opportunities that we have to move forward. So they come into different shapes and forms and intensities. But yes, they are definitely necessary for us to learn, to reflect, and most importantly, to re-signify that suffer into something good. Okay. But then one might think, well, if suffering necessary, I mean, why do we suffer? Why do we have to go through this? For the reason I just explained. But the silver lining is that, as much as suffering is necessary, it's also fleeting, it's temporary. So there's no such a thing as someone suffering forever. Because as we suffer, we learn, we move forward, and then we go to different situations, and that doesn't hurt anymore or hurt less, and we suffer less. So the great message here is suffer is necessary, but it's also temporary. So there is no need to be anxious. There is no need to be afraid that any bad situation that you're going through your life right now, and that's causing you to suffer, that's not going to last forever, right? Because this is just a phase that we have to go through to learn something. All right. So moving forward. So now that we know that suffering is really necessary, right, for us to go through the world that we live in, is it optional? And yes, suffer it is optional. However, it's gonna happen, we know, but it really depends on how we decide to go through that trial, and to get the opportunity. Because if we are in control of our own selves, and if we know ourselves, we have the tools to avoid new afflictions. And that is very important, because some say that the majority of the suffering that we go through this life, it's created here. So if we have the tools and if we have the ways to avoid creating new suffering, then we're going to suffer less. And suffering less, we have more energy to go through the things that we have to go through. Sometimes people were born with physical conditions that they cannot change, so they have to accept and live with that physical condition that they have, which might bring some suffering, of course, which is already a burden. So you don't want to create more to yourself. So when I say that suffering is optional, that's what I'm trying to say, is that you have the option not to suffer more if you chose to. And talking about suffering from past lives and things that we cannot change, acceptance and resignation are the way to go. Because as much as we try to be in control all the time, and I guess everybody here is going to be a little bit guilty about that, the only thing that we can control is ourselves, our actions, how we interact with other people. We cannot control if it's going to rain or not. We cannot control how someone is going to respond to an action from ourselves. So when we realize that within ourselves we have the power to make those choices, this has definitely helped us to accept our own situations, our own struggles. And resignation, irrational resignation, is not an act of spite or anything, but understanding why you're going through that and just trying to live your better life. And one more thing, suffering being not forever, as we mentioned before, it really helped us to put into perspective the fact that it is optional, because that gives us the choice, right? And we all are spirits with free will, so we really decide which way to go. So I really want to give you guys that, to reflect that we have control of ourselves. I'm not going to say we have control of our life, because that there are too many variants, outside variants, that directly impact us. But in your inner self, in your attitudes, that's something you can control, and we have to do everything that we can to make sure that every single day we're learning something different, and we are making sure they're going to be better people. And that's just the key, so we can choose not to suffer or to suffer less. All right, so moving forward. All right, so choosing love always, and that is the answer to. I was going to say that was going to be the choice of not to suffer, but we know that we cannot escape suffering. But choosing love, it helps us to suffer better, I would say, I guess, for lack of a better word. Because suffering is temporary, and if we decide to go through those with courage, with love, certainly we're going to learn that lesson easier than if we chose to go, with a revolt mind and with all those bad feelings and bad actions. That would definitely, take on the burden, and we're going to be in that situation for more time. And when I say to control yourself, I'm really talking about inner reform. That we all, as a spiritist, right, that's something that we hear a lot, and we always strive individually every single day to try to understand ourselves better and try to be in tune with our emotions and to have a connection with God and the good spirits, always asking them to be around us and give us the good intuition so we can go through our lives. So that's what is taking control means, right? It's essentially an inner reform. And, we live in a world that's going through a revolution or regeneration, right? Going from one step to another. And we all know that pride, selfishness, vanity are the main offenders of our quest, to be better. And these are the things that we have to fight. And when I say choose love always, is to battle against, those feelings of selfishness, vanity, and pride, because they are essentially the source of most of our suffering. If you take, for example, family relationships, right? Sometimes they are very tenuous and difficult. And most of the time it's just because two people cannot talk to each other because, one is too proud and the other one, is too selfish, right? And there's a lot of vanity around. So these are the things that kind of poison our relationships and our society these days. And we cannot fix society just by thinking I'm going to fix society. The only thing I can fix is myself, right? And fixing myself and choose love with everything that I do, it's contagious, right? So if I choose to be loving with my mom, then she's going to decide to be loved with my dad, with my brother, with my sister. And that creates, an effect, that essentially gets to everybody. So it is really important to start within yourself so that can spread, around our families and our circles of relationship. But choosing love is not always easy because we have to battle that within ourselves too, because we also have pride, selfishness, vanity, all these things. So it is a daily exercise and requires discipline, right? It's a daily thing that we all have to take upon, and nobody's asking anyone here to do like Herculean effort. But, sometimes step by step, before you leave your house, read the message or something that's good and fulfilling, right? Try to pray every time that you can, that you're going through a situation that is difficult. Or sometimes just pray to be thankful for the things that you have. These things, these little things, they might not mean anything, but they start to become habits, right? And then that has there's a power to change you. And most of you, I'm sure, have gone through moments where you're starting to do these things automatically, and then you see a change in your life. And this is choosing love, right? It's choosing to see the world for the beautiful things that he has, um, and for the things that are not so beautiful, right? We pray and we try to make them better, right? That's the only way that we can all, as a society, strive forward. And I'm going to read something here again from the chapter 5, Blessed are the Afflicted. Is in the section called Reasons for Resignation, number 12. It says, Blessed are the afflicted, for they will be consoled. Jesus indicates at the same time the compensation that await those who suffer and the resignation that blesses suffering as a prelude of the cure. So this is just just so beautiful, because it says in the end that suffering as a prelude of the cure. So, and makes total sense, because if suffering is temporary, what's after suffering? It's just happiness. So Jesus says, if you're suffering, you're starting your process of curing yourself. And that should be to all of us. Sometimes we see suffering as a bad thing. Most of the times we do, and within reason, because sometimes we don't understand why things are happening, right? So that's totally normal. But if we shift that perception that suffering is a bad thing, and instead we either say, if I'm suffering, I'm starting to get to the cure, which is happiness, and also it's an opportunity for me to learn something. So more important than not is a reflection of what's happening to you, what's that trying to teach you. Because if we don't go that route, we're just gonna suffer and victimize ourselves because things are happening, right? And I'm not trying to say that people should not do that. Everybody goes through phases and everybody's different. But after you're feeling sorry for everything that's happening, reflection is really important, because that's the pivotal point between choosing to suffer forever or moving forward and suffering less. So it is really important. And one key thing is that I can only do that for myself. If I'm suffering, and if I have to start my healing process, my cure process, my pursuit of happiness, I can only do that by myself. Obviously, I can have family and friends around me cheering me up and help me with the way, but I'm the one that has to make the choice, whether I'm going to choose love, and I'm going to love more, and I'm going to reflect upon my suffering, and I'm going to figure out what's going on, and I'm going to live my life forward, or I'm not going to choose love, I'm going to choose suffering, I'm going to be victimizing myself and attracting all that bad energy, all the bad stuff, on me, that's going to generate more suffering. So it's really a choice. And it's written in the gospel, right? If you're suffering, that's your pathway to happiness. And Jesus said that. So that should be enough of assurance for any of us that better days awaits us in the future. So the process of suffering is really wonderful, if you ask me, because once you see that suffering is an opportunity, it's a path for you to go through something quicker, because it's really pushing you to make changes with your life. It's really rewarding to understand that. And then after you go through it, you look behind and you realize all the lessons you've learned and how you've changed, and how you've changed with yourself, with others, and how you disciplined yourself, to be in tune with your emotions, to be connected with the higher power, to be, open to the good intuitions of the good spirits. So it's really a transformational process. So guys, choose love always. Suffering is temporary. It is necessary, it is inevitable, but we don't have to be miserable. I guess that's the message I want to give it to you guys today. When you think about suffering, think about an opportunity to be better, an opportunity to an eye-opening experience for your next chapter. Instead of, I have to suffer this because I deserve this. No, not necessarily. I mean, just get that out of your head. Just make sure that every single day you ask for the good spirits to be around you and show you the path of the good things, and I'm sure that it's going to be answered. So that's what I want to share with you guys today. I really hope that I could give somehow a leap of faith that everything that we go through here is for our own good, and is really up to us to choose love and live our lives fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, so much, because you really brought a comforting perspective of suffering. Thank you very much. It was
I'm glad.
amazing.
Thank you.
Our final speaker of the day is Weber Costa. He's from the Spiritist Center that is hosting us today, Plenitude Spiritist Society of Orlando. And his topic will be Packing for Eternal Life. What will we carry with us? Welcome, Weber.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to people watching us from home, and to those that will watch later on. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with all of you. So I want to thank first the Spiritist Federation of Florida for this great opportunity. And when I was asked to speak about this topic, Packing for Life Eternal, what we'll carry with us. And this, I thought this was a very interesting topic, because it makes us, wonder, what do we have to do while we're here, and what we take with us when we go through this inevitable transition from the material world into the spiritual world. This topic also is very dear to my heart, because as a civilization, we do a really poor job preparing ourselves for what's inevitable. The only thing we know for sure, for a fact, is that we're all gonna, at some point, disincarnate. We all are going to die. That's the only thing we have in common in our civilization here in the material side. The worst thing is also we don't prepare our loved ones, our family members. We don't offer them any tools so they can help us go through this transition. So that's the purpose of what we're going to talk about here this afternoon. It's a short presentation. This topic we could, talk at length about it, but it's important for us to discuss, because it's still today a taboo in our society to talk about life after life, because that's what happens. Life continues on, our life eternal, because that's the understanding of all religions, is that the spirit lives forever. So we all have that in common. But then as Spiritism brings to us, things a little bit different. We're going to understand a little bit about some divine laws that are in place. And as a civilization, especially in the Western side of the world, in Christianity, we don't do a great job. We don't prepare the followers of Christianity to really go through this in a much easier way. In the Eastern side of the world, they do a better job than we do here on the Western side. You have belief systems in the eastern side of the world, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, where they believe in two divine laws that governs our planet, which is the law of cause and effect that was spoke earlier today, and also the law of reincarnation. And this is not a matter of a belief system, of us believing or not, if your religion agrees with that or not. Those are divine laws that are in place since the beginning of times. God put those in place. So what happened is, as we evolve individually and collectively, we start to learn more and start understanding better these laws that God has put here in place for us. Because the laws are not going to change. We are the ones that need to adapt to this, understand these laws that are in place. So the purpose this afternoon is really to briefly go through what are some of the tools that we can use, some of the things that are available to us. And the more we understand about this transition, the easier it will be for us, for our family members, and for our spiritual guides, our guardian angel, and our spiritual family. They're there waiting for us. So if we understand what we're doing, it's much easier for everyone. So continue on. Accomplish another journey on earth. Their spirits go back to the spiritual world, taking with them the accumulated experiences learned in different lives. So let's think about this a little bit. Today, we're an accumulation of experiences that we acquire through our past lives that brought us to who we are today in terms of knowledge, in terms of ethics and morality. So we are today the accumulation of these past lives. The good thing about it is that today we hold the key for where we're going to wake up in the spiritual world, and also the kind of lives we can have in the future when we have to come back through reincarnation here. So that's the point today, as been talked all day today, since early in the morning with David, with Jana, with Lena, and Victor now. The point today is Spiritism, they put on us the responsibility for our personal growth, to seek spiritual knowledge. So the more we know, the easier it will be on this transition, because we're all going to have to go through. So we have to understand that once we arrive in the spiritual realm, we don't arrive as angels nor demons. We are spirits, continue learning after disposing the body. We are the same soul as before our death. Because a lot of times people has the misconception, the misunderstanding that once you go back to the spiritual world, you're going to have all your knowledge from your prior lives. Depending in an evolution spectrum of the spirit, where they are evolved to a certain degree, they may be able to access most of this information. But most spirits, they will not access, because there's got to be a reason for that. Divinity, I was going to look what's more beneficial to us, to the spirit, for us to continue evolving, to improve ourselves. Because there's a reason why we don't remember what we have done in past lives. Because just look back in our history. You're going to see that a lot of bad things have happened in the past. And most of those bad things was done by us. So we're just coming back here to continue to improve and be able to redeem ourselves from mistakes that were done in the past. So we need to make sure that we understand that we are who we are. So that's why it's so important for us to continue to improve constantly. As Lena brought earlier, know thyself. As Saint Augustine brought that to us, that we should always reflect upon that. That is very important. So as we go back to the spiritual world, the disembodiment of losing our body does not change our habits and our customs, does not grant us any titles, and does not withdraw our merits or achievements. So there are two parts here. We are creatures of habits, humans. That's why we should try to acquire good habits, connect to a spirit center, connect to a church, do charity, try to help one another, because we're creatures of habits. The habits that we acquire here, we're going to take it with us. So if we establish habits such as alcohol, drug abuse, anything in excess, we're going to bring that with us. So keep that in mind. So those are the things that we need to work on it. And also, once we cross and we make that crossing, we do not take any titles with us. It doesn't matter if you were a big CEO of a big company, or if you were a prince, or whatever you were here, that has zero meaning in the spiritual world. However, what it counts is the merits that we're able to achieve by helping one another, by helping ourselves, acquiring spiritual knowledge, and knowledge in general as well. Because the spirit, as with their multiple existence, they will acquire a lot of knowledge to become eventually an integral, as a whole, enlightened spirit. So keep that in mind. We do not carry with us who we were here on earth. And you see that a lot sometimes in Spirit Center, where we have a work in mediumship, where we channel spirits to be able to assist them, like a fraternal counseling, to be able to talk to them. And some spirits, they get to the other side, they still think they are someone important as who they were over here. They still attach to that mentality, and they have not moved on and moved forward into the spiritual world, because yes, we'll continue to improve ourselves in the spiritual world as well. So we have, the more information we have about that, the easier the transition is going to be. So each person presents himself or herself after death the same as he or she ever lived. We don't change that much. We are who we are. No miracle of transformation takes place for those who reach the spiritual realm. Rare are those who awaken with conscience after the inevitable crossing. This is important. Why is rare? Those who get to the other side and they know exactly what's going on. Because few of us really devote their time to learn about the importance of the spiritual life. A lot of times in the same work I just explained that it's done in the Spirit Center for channeling spirits, to counsel them, to speak with them, a lot of spirits that arrive in a Spirit Center, a great percentage, are spirits that just lost, that just don't know that they disincarnated. They're confused. When we disincarnate, we go from our physical body, going back to the spiritual world, we go through a process that's called a confusion state. And that confusion state is different for everyone. The more knowledge we have about the spiritual life, the shorter time that confusion state will be. And sometimes that can take weeks, months, years. All depend on the knowledge that we have. So that's why it's so important for us to continue seek to better ourselves, to acquire spiritual knowledge. Very important. Some spirits, when we get to the other side, then they finally realize all the lost time. Because they finally realize that, guess what? The law of cause and effect in reincarnation did exist. And then they feel really, all the sorrows and the regrets, fears and anxieties because of all the lost time. That's one of the common things that happens in spirits when it gets to the other side. This is not to scare anyone. This is really to bring knowledge. So people understand that when we get to the other side, we just carry with us who we are today. And a lot of times, if we, in defiance, we decide to, no, I don't want to believe that stuff, it's okay. Because that's how divinity works. Time is in favor of divinity because of the law of reincarnation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that very briefly as well. So the spirit, once he realizes, he perceives that life goes on without major modifications. So one of the things that we should work on it, that states here about fear, we have to be very careful with that, because there are two sentiments that in the spiritual world can be used against us by other spirits that really want to dominate us, which is fear and guilt. So we have to be very careful about those things. So the better we are psychologically as when we transition, the easier it will be for us on the other side. So we need to make sure that all unresolved matters that we are aware of, we should try to resolve it. Because once we get to the other side, we're going to realize that we should have taken care of that problem. And then we're going to feel the sorrows and the regrets because we didn't do. So make sure that we address whatever unresolved matter that we may have. One of the things that's very important as well is never to forget that we are not alone. In fact, we never been alone. We have the support from our guardian angel. We have the support from our spiritual family. We have the support from spirits. They're here just for the sake of helping divinity. So most beings are not able to perceive the support given by superior spirits. And yes, because even the most unhappy and turned to evil beings are not forgotten or abandoned by divine aid. This is very important to remember. For whatever reason, when we wake up on the other side and we're in a place that we realize we're not happy with that situation, we're not in a place that we're expected to be, always remember that help is there. But sometimes, because we're in a different frequency, we cannot identify our guardian angel that might be right next to us. So the tool that we should always remember that is in our favor is a prayer. Every time when we pray, it connects us with our spiritual friends, our guardian angel, good spirits. So if you don't have the habit of praying, start praying here. Pray before you go to sleep. Pray when you wake up in the morning. Pray throughout the day. And once you realize, because we're all going to go through this, you wake up on the other side, once you made that transition from the material world into the spiritual world, if you need help, help is there, but they wait for us to ask for it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that so we can understand why divinity does that. Because they don't want to just hand the things to us. They want us to understand that we should always better ourselves. Because once we establish that knowledge, then we really improve and evolve spiritually. This is a scene from the bestseller book, Nosso Lar, or it's called the Astro CD, The Spiritual Journey. Great book, and the movie. If you've not seen it, I strongly recommend the series of Andreia Luiz. It's at least the beginning of the books there. If you read the first, I would say 13 to 14 books on a series, you'll be able to really grasp and have a really good knowledge of how things work in the spiritual world. So, as it states here, death awaits everyone. As we discussed before, it's inevitable. It's the only sure thing that we have. At some point, we're all going to have to die, to disincarnate. So preparing for such an event is a pressing task. And that's why I said in the beginning, that is a topic that's very dear to my heart, because we do not discuss this enough. In Christianity, we establish a taboo. We don't have time to go into it. I can tell exactly when that happened, but we just don't have the time. Okay. So keep that in mind, that experienced souls will be able to overcome the barrier of the grave and walk in freedom. Why do they say that? Because the more knowledge you acquire here about the spiritual life, once you get to the situation, you'll be able to recognize. It's not a surprise. So that's what we need to work on it. Be aware of that. Seek a spirit center nearby. Try to learn a little bit more about the spiritual world. You have nothing to lose. If you don't agree, it's okay. But try. Because we must understand about this divine law that is called reincarnation. Only through reincarnation things make sense. That's the only way you can settle with your own self the love that God has for us. Because that's the only way you can settle and understand why some people are born paraplegic. Some people are born with the golden spoon. Some people are born there in Africa and they're starving right now. Why is that happening? Some people are born in the United States in rich families. The only way we can understand that is once you understand the law of cause and effect and the law of reincarnation. And you're going to see that everything is done for one purpose and one purpose only. Is for us to improve and to be more enlightened in the end. Because that's what's going to happen to all of us. We already know the destination. The destination is for all of us to become eventually pure spirits. We don't have to incarnate anymore. But right now, think about Earth as a school. The best analogy to think about reincarnation is that we all belong to the spiritual world because we're eternal spirits. And we come to Earth as if we're going to school to better ourselves, to improve our ethics and morality, to redeem ourselves from mistakes we've done to others and to ourselves. And then in the end, we look back, we say, great, you know what? I'm living better than when I first came in. That's the goal. So reincarnation is the biggest proof of love that God has for us, his creation. Because he gives one opportunity after another for us to be able to better ourselves. So reincarnation is a blessed opportunity to progress. The planet in which we are immersed is a blessed battlefield for personal improvement. Every day that we're living in the flesh is another chance to start again. This is very important to understand. We cannot go back and change our past, even here in this lifetime. What it's in the past is in the past, already happened. However, every day we can always improve today, and that will directly impact our future here on this lifetime. So those are the things that we need to pay attention to. So reincarnation must be used to acquire the true values that resist death. In the divine accounts, the sum of noble deeds cancels the equivalent collection of unworthy acts. Think about this, because a lot of times when we talk about the law of cause and effect, as we talked about earlier today, Jana talked about action, reaction. A lot of times people think when we talk about a law of cause and effect, they think about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's not it. And right here, what we can do in order to get rid of and delete the unworthy acts that we've done in the past, all we have to do is to do more good deeds. Think about like as on a scale. The more good deeds that we do, charity, helping one another, helping divinity, is going to start erasing a lot of the bad things we've done in the past. Because in the end, divinity, they don't want to punish us. They want us to understand and wake up for these divine laws that are in place, for us to have our own responsibility to better ourselves. That's what they want. They don't want to punish us. If punishment was the goal, you would not leave the spiritual world. We just stay in the what we call the zones of umbral, which we believe to be hell for some people, you know. So we would have just stayed there. There was no reason to leave there if the goal was not to better ourselves, to improve. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind that it's really up to each one of us. Nobody can do for us. We cannot improve someone else. We can show the way, we can show tools, we can show the path and the door, but the person who's going to have to walk through that path and open the door is each one of us individually. So, as the picture here shows, the love that we dedicate to thy neighbor is an educational service to humanity and a setup to higher realm. So we need to put into practice what Jesus taught us. Jesus brought us the law of love. Prior to Jesus, Moses had brought us the law of justice. But only through Jesus, he brought us the law of love, that we need to love one another and we need to help one another. That's how we're going to improve as a civilization. That's how we're going to improve as a planet in both sides, in the material side of our planet and in the spiritual side. So we're getting here to the end because we only had 30 minutes. Like I said, this topic, we can really speak for a while. We need to think about this adapting to this new reality in the spiritual realm. This new reality will depend on how we have prepared ourselves. The more we prepare ourselves here, the easier it will be for us individually for this transition. The easier it will be for our loved ones, because they will understand that it's not a goodbye. It's just a see you later. We will see them again. So we will harvest what we sow from today's crops of fortunes and misfortunes. It's up to us. That's one of the hardest things once you become a spiritist. Because the spiritists, they don't put our salvation on anything. It's not just saying, oh, I believe in Jesus as my Lord and Savior. We would say, okay, great. That's a good thing. That's a good start. But it's up to us individually to seek to improve ourselves, acquire more knowledge, improve our morality, help one another, redeem ourselves from mistakes we've done in the past. To finalize, in the Spirit's book, we have question 165. And Kardec asked the question to the spirits: if having knowledge of Spiritism will influence on a duration of the confusion state when we disincarnate, going back to the spiritual world. And the spirits answer, yes, it will have a substantial influence on its duration, because the spirit already acquired the knowledge. They already have a prior understanding what's going to happen. But then the spirit finalizes with this beautiful answer. And he says, however, the practice of righteousness and a clear conscience have the most influence. Right there and then, the spirits just prove to us that it all depends what we do here today. Having a clear conscience is the solution. So let's make sure that whatever we have pending here that we are aware of, let's resolve it. Because that is going to assist us tremendously in this transition that is inevitable for all of us. Thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Weber. Wonderful. You really had a great presentations today, in the morning, the afternoon. You guys, wonderful. And Victor is back, so we can start the Q&A. Welcome back, Victor.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with you. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay, our first question is how to choose no suffering when so many challenges happen to us?
Okay, so I guess we established that we cannot choose not to suffer, right? Well, no, I take that back. Yes, we can choose not to suffer, right? But just like everything in life, there are consequences to it, right? Are you choosing not to suffer because you're not able to deal with this now, but want to do it later? Or are you choosing not to suffer because you're running from it? Right? So those are two different approaches with two very different consequences, right? If you choose not to suffer because you don't think you're ready emotionally or physically or spiritually to go through something, I mean, that's fine, right? Because we all have our moments, and, you know, when it's time, we deal with things. But if we choose to run from it, right, it's just going to chase us, right? And usually it's like a snowball effect, right? If you don't deal with it now, when it comes, it's like this big snowball that's just going to, you know, ram into you. And as far as challenges, I mean, it's not something, unfortunately, it's not something we can change, because the nature of the spirits that we are at this moment and the planet that we are in, we are, you know, all in all, in a planet of trials and expiation. So that's the characteristic of this planet, is challenges, right? And I do understand that challenges, you know, they have different levels and intensities, right? But I think it's really up to you to decide which challenge you want to take and which ones you're gonna, just put like on the side for a moment, right? And really focus your energy, because otherwise you just can't, you know, tackle everything at the same time.
Without a doubt. Okay, now we're gonna go to Weber. How do you, so I sent to us like this: how do I know if I am living with more virtues than when I arrived in this present life? That you wanna know, right?
That's an interesting question. That's a good question. And there's no simple answer, because there's a couple of different ways how you can answer this. But the easiest way to put it simple is, once we get to the spiritual world and we finally go through our confusion state, we're going to self-analyze the life we just had. And by doing that self-analyzation, we're going to realize the things we were supposed to work on it and the things that we actually accomplished. Because most of us and how we are today, we are part of planning our incarnation. So we know the things that we need to work on. In fact, we know today, if you like to meditate from time to time, you just start to looking inside of your own self, you're going to realize that things you need to work on it. You know what those things are, right? It's the same thing when you pass, you make that transition, you're in the spiritual world, you look back, and say, I had to work in all these different areas here, and what did I accomplish? Now, keep in mind one thing too. Sometimes you may have failed certain things, but you had excel in other things. And what divinity really wants is in that scale, maybe the things we excel, it worked in our favor. And in the end, you're going to see, you know what? This was not a bad incarnation. I really got here. I done better than I was expecting, So, but usually to make it a simple answer would be the self-analyzing that we all going to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to make the balance. And for sure, I believe most of us, when we get there, we have a positive balance, right?
That's right.
Hope for that. Vitor, can you come back to you?
Yes, please.
We combine two questions in one. I hope it's clear to everybody. It's this. Must suffering always be in direct contrast to happiness? And if the suffering is very intense for some and not for others, could it be linked to past lives?
Okay. All right. So the first part of the question, whether, okay, go ahead. The first one, please.
Must suffering always be in direct contrast to happiness?
Got it. So, I mean, in my opinion, yes, because there are two different stages of the spirit, right? I don't know if there's someone that it's happy and at the same time suffering, right? Because to me, those are two different emotional states, right? But one leads to the other, right? We know the outcome of suffering is happiness, right? And I just think that is a path that, all of us, we go through in many times during our days, right? I mean, because sometimes we think about suffering being something so big, but sometimes it's the small things, right? It makes us suffer, right? So I would say they're two opposites, okay? But that's my opinion. And the second one, as far as people going, I think the question was people that go to the same suffering, they take different takes. That kind of what it is, and if that has to do with past lives.
Yeah, the question is what I understood like that. Why some people have a lot of suffering and another ones not?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Is this because of past lives? It's coming from past lives, this intense suffering?
Got it. I mean, it definitely could be. But there's no rule to it. I mean, because, in Spiritism, these things are essentially subjective, right? I mean, there's no like cake recipe, right? If you do this, and that, that's what you're gonna get. But again, it depends, because sometimes, people seek their own suffering, and sometimes that's why they suffer as much. And sometimes there are things that come from past lives, right? Because Weber was talking about reincarnation, right? And essentially reincarnation, we bring the good stuff with us, but we bring the bad ones too. And that's the reparation process we all have to go through. And it depends on the spirit, because I mean, we all are unique as spirits, and sometimes the same situation is presented to different people, but they're going to respond completely different based on their life stories. And as Weber said, I mean, what are they bringing on their luggage, right? Kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, short answer is yes. I mean, if there are people that suffer from one to the more than another, that could be definitely linked to a past life. But again, you have to see what that person is doing in their actual life, to see if that's not like new suffering that this person got, not necessarily, from past lives.
Yeah.
Victor, can I add one more thing that you just said there? We have to understand that suffering is a state of mind, right? Because as you said, you can have two people going through the same trials. One is gonna look at the trial and work it and realize and accept that, and don't really complain too much. The other one's going to be complaining the whole time and think, oh my gosh, why God's punishing me? Why I'm going through all this? Mm-hmm. So suffering is really optional, because it really it's up to you where you at in that, in the progressive state of the spirit. You can really go through I know some people that have gone through a lot of difficult situations, and you look at them, they're fine.
Yeah.
Because they realize, look, it's not punishment. It is the situation that I'm in right now. Let me work towards to get out of this situation.
Right.
That's all you can do.
Exactly. Yeah. And the Vito talks a lot about that, right? That it's an instrument for us it's going to make us to go towards your happiness. The two thoughts are complete.
Yeah, I mean, because happiness, it is our destiny, right? That's the destination, of all of us. I mean, whether you want or not, I mean, if you don't want to, I mean, life just going to bulldoze you in, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, happiness is the end goal.
Mm-hmm. You can choose go fast or lower, right?
Yeah,
slower.
Exactly.
Okay, so the next question, we'd like to say to everybody that you're not going to be able to answer all the questions because of the time. Mm-hmm. And the next question is for Weber. It's how to leave behind our loved ones if most of the time it is not planned to live with them.
Well, you got to remember one thing. It's all about, as we were talking about earlier, and how we prepare ourselves and how we prepare our loved ones, right? They need to understand it's not a goodbye. It's not that it's finished. No, it's like a see you later. I'm going before you to prepare, our house there once you guys come in. The other thing you got to remember is not necessarily our blood family here on earth. It's the same as our spiritual family, although most of the times they are. Okay. So the other thing we need to remember as well is nobody's by themselves. As we explained, we're always being assisted by good spirits, our guardian angel, spirits, they're friends of the family, and good spirits are just here to do good, So we're leaving them behind. They're not unassisted. They've been helped as well, So that's why it's so important for us to understand this spiritual reality, so we can pass that to them. So they understand that it's like, there's no need to suffer. In fact, one of the most difficult things is like when we're going through that transition, that confusion state, is when the family members are like, calling from the person that just disincarnate desperately, and say, why have you abandoned me? Why you left? What are we going to do without you? Now, we're sending this energy to the spirit. Now, think about this. The spirit's receiving that, and they're like, what can I do? They can't do anything, right? So you're not making their job easier to go through this transition. You're making it harder for them, right? Instead of being assisting them, let's pray for them. Let's make sure the person's being assisted. No, we're calling them. We're calling them to come back, and we can't come back, So that's what we need to understand. Make sure we educate our family members. Make sure that we offer them tools that they can help us through prayer, to understanding, vibrating positively towards the person that just disincarnated, and understand that if you truly love that person, if they're part of your spiritual family, you will see them again.
Yeah. Teresa, can I compliment something?
Yes, for sure.
So when I was listening to Weber's presentation, and he mentioned that one of the things we have to do is to educate our loved ones, right, about that. It's just like it hit home because it's so true, and I'm going to tell you guys why. There is a book that I used with my kids, my teens here in the youth group, called Na Hora do Adeus, I don't know if there is this translation to English, but essentially it is a group of spirits that visits funerals, wakes, when some, in Brazil, obviously, right? And they tell the situation of each one of those places in the spiritual world and in the incarnated world, and how people's actions and thoughts and behaviors directly affect the spirit that it was just in the process of disembodiment, right? And that opened my eyes so much to the fact that it's really truly interconnected, right? And as Weber said, it's not like, okay, the person passed, it's done, goodbye. No, it goes on. So
Yeah.
it is important, for us that we have that knowledge to pass that on, right? Because it's benefiting them, and it's also benefiting the one that is disconnecting from this world. Because we all know it takes some time, and sometimes it's not as simple as we would like it to be, right? So I mean, it just hit home. I think that was the greatest advice. Yes.
It's
For
a great
sure.
thought, Victor. Just one more thing, Teresa, and that is in the
Yes.
spirits book. Victor
Exactly.
brought it up because what happened is a lot of spirits, when they disincarnate, they go to that confusion state. Some are put to sleep. There's a lot of different cases. Depends on each situation, right? But
Right.
for those spirits, just like us, they're a little bit, they already have a somewhat of an understanding. They actually take us to our funeral. And there,
Yes.
you're no longer
Yeah.
there. And it's in a
Yeah.
spirit book. You're no longer there. You're going to see what the people are talking about you. So how you actually did. And then
Yeah.
the best one is after the funeral, they also take you, especially when you have you are able to acquire things here on earth. When they're gonna do the will, they bring you there as well, because that's where you're gonna see what people are really gonna talk about
Right.
you.
Yeah.
So that's very
#no
revealing,
filter.
right, Victor? I mean, that's very revealing. You go like, wow, then you're gonna
Yeah.
realize how people really loved you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And then since we are talking about books, another suggestion would be the Heaven and Hell, that
Yes.
you're going to see
Great.
exactly the testimony from the spirits that when they discarnate, what they felt. And talking about the education, we can read in the Works of the Eternal Life the difference from two families, one that was not educated for when the husband leaves, and the other one who had a good education, and how they react when the loved one leaves. That's a great suggestion for reading.
Absolutely.
Wow, the time passes fast, and we get to the end. Very grateful for having you all here. Was a really wonderful time, a lot of learning, and we suggest for those who didn't have a chance to be here, it's going to be available on the Facebook and in the YouTube. We want to say thanks to the Plenitude that was our host. And then I'm sure that we are here, we're going to leave here much more enlightened. Thank you to all. If you want one more thing to say, feel free.
No, I just want to say that I'm looking forward to visit Plenitude again. So hopefully that will be soon.
Oh, yes.
We look forward to host you there, to receive you there. It will be a pleasure.
Nice.
It's going to be wonderful.
Thank you, Teresa, as well. Thank you to the Spirits Federation of Florida for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure being with you guys today.
Thank you all. So we hope you can meet again soon. Thank you to each and everyone who connected with us this day. And see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.